Alright, today we are going on to section 4.12, and we are talking about integer division. Now this is likely review for a lot of you, so after we do a couple of my little examples, you are free to go on if you feel like you know what we're doing. But a couple of rules that we need to talk about. When we are dividing things, we have two numbers. Say we have 10 divided by 5, and we end up with 2 because there are two 5s in 10. This is called the quotient. A good word to know, because lots of times they will try to trick you with using that word on some of those standardized testing things. And often we call these our divisors. So as you might expect, we are going to be talking about integer division, and we are going to be talking about using integers for them. And that means looking at the positive and negative sides of both of these things. Now, the rules for these are the same as multiplication, which is really handy to remember. So again, if I am taking this equation that I was looking at before, and I do negative 10 divided by 5, and the question that we can ask ourselves is one of these numbers negative? And if that's the case, then my answer is going to be negative. So I'm going to end up with negative 2. Now, the same is true if I switch the opposite direction. 10 divided by negative 5 is equal to negative 2. Again, if I have 10 divided by 5, I'm going to end up with a positive 2. And finally, a negative 10 divided by a negative 5 is the same as when we are multiplying, and we end up with a positive 2. So again, if you would write those rules out for me, a negative divided by a positive equals a negative. A positive divided by a negative equals a negative. A positive divided by a positive equals a positive. And the two negatives kind of negate themselves. And we end up with a positive. Now, sometimes we're going to end up with a lot of things that we are multiplying together with, and we have more than one. And the best way to do that, I find, is to kind of count them up and see what wins. For example, say I have negative 2 divided by negative 3a. Now, if I take this and I want to simplify it, one of the things to remember is that when we're doing math, we don't see this divided sign like this very often. Typically, instead of that, we're going to see it rewritten as another way. Instead, we'll see it written like this: negative 2 divided by negative 3a. And this is a much more common way to see it written, because the divided sign can get confusing, and it can get order of operations really confused, and it can be hard to keep it all in our head. So when we see a number like this, it's easy to see what we do with our negatives, because I can say that there's a negative on top, there's a negative on the bottom, and I can easily just turn that back into a positive. And I can say this is simplified at 2/3 a. Okay, let's take a look at a couple more examples. Okay, say I have, let me get some more colors. Example 1, I'm going to say I have negative 30 divided by 10. And I can see that this fits very well with my rules up here. I have a negative divided by a positive divided by a positive would end up as a negative. There are 3 sets of 10 in 30, so I end up with negative 10 for my answer. Okay? Example 2. I have negative 12 divided by negative 3. And if I wanted, I could write them like this. Negative 12 divided by negative 3. And I can see, obviously, that I'm going to lose my positives. Or I'm going to lose my negatives and turn into a positive. 12 thirds. And I can say that 12 thirds is the same as 12 divided by 3. And I can simplify that pretty easily into 4, which is my answer. One more, and I think we should probably get it. It's a fairly simple idea, and it's likely that you guys learn this in 6th grade. Let's take a look at this one. 18 divided by negative 3. Now, in this case, it's given to us in this odd format that looks exactly like a fraction because it is. And we can simplify this into a whole number. Because we can say how many 3's are in 18. Well, I know that it's 6, and there's one negative, so that means I'm going to end up with a negative 6. Pretty simple. I hope that it makes sense, and if you have a question, ask me. Good luck.